Greetings, you beautiful people. This is Digital MB Martin Blythe representing Team Clocked. I just want to do a quick video today, mainly to do with the Sega news that hit the tabloids on Friday. Very, very bad news for Sega. Just to give you a brief overview of what's been said. It was announced in Japan that there would be voluntary retirement opportunities or offers going out to 300 staff just in Japan. At the same time, it was also announced that Sega of America were also going to be downsizing and restructuring by moving their offices from San Francisco down to another part of California, which would mean limited redundancies there as well. And the other news when this was updated after was that there's also limited redundancies going to be taking place in Sega of Europe as well. So three big areas of Sega Group are going to be hugely affected, and we're going to know a little bit more about the story next week. Now obviously, as a big Sega fan, and you may have watched the video on our YouTube channel, Team Clock YouTube channel, last week, where we talked about the games that defined us as people, what we experienced growing up and why we still play games to this day. And we basically talked a lot about Sega, the franchise that they brought in place, the hardware, how much of an impact that had on us. I mean, obviously, the 1990s, they were huge. Sega were absolutely huge, especially in Europe. And I mean, they were beating Nintendo by a country mile. So 20 years on, they're in this position, and it made me feel quite old to think of it that way as well. One of the things I wanted to basically talk about today was the state of the Sonic franchise, which a lot of people are putting the blame on for why Sega is in this position. And a part of them makes me feel like they're right in that. One of the things as I've noticed is with the Sega games, with the newest Sega games, the ones that are coming back with really bad reviews, especially the latest one, Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, is it doesn't seem to capture that essence of Sonic like it used to. The last time they made a Sonic game that sort of felt like the old games from the 90s was actually Sonic the Hedgehog 4, episodes 1 and 2. Now, admittedly, the zones and the acts that they had on those games were just rehashes of the old levels, which is a shame. You know, they definitely could have done more to create new zones. I can't imagine being that hard to create new zones 20 years later. But it still it did catch that sort of essence of Sonic still, and it had a really big difficulty spike, especially in episode 2, and the music was there as well. The music was basically just like what it was back in the day. However, the 3D versions of the Sonic games were starting to get really bad, and you can sort of sense that with games, with a couple of the games that they did. Sonic Unleashed, I think, was one of them. They tried desperately to change what Sonic was about, and it just didn't work. One common mistake that people make with Sonic is that if you go back to the first couple of games, it wasn't really much about the speed of Sonic. There was tiny segments in the acts where he would, you know, fly through and do loops and do springs and all that stuff, but 90% of the game was platforming, and careful platforming. You had to be very cautious with where you were going, because there were spikes and you would lose your rings, and then you would have to keep enough rings to get the Dr. Robotnik or Dr. Eggman for the final boss. And it seemed like that it was starting to lose its way as it got on. For some reason, they started doing these things with the 3D games where it was just speed, just uncontrollable speed, and you had no idea what was going on the screen. Absolutely no idea. And that isn't Sonic. That is not how Sonic works. Now, the other problem you've got with that is that because the games ended up being so quick, the camera couldn't keep up. Now, that is bad. That's really, really bad. There's nothing more frustrating than dying on games and it not being your fault. There's nothing worse. So the camera didn't work. The controls were all over the place. The momentum that he would carry as you move forward was just, it didn't make sense. And these are the things that just crippled the 3D versions of the Sonic games. Now, adding a different spin on that, was then adding the bits with Knuckles and Tails. Unfortunately, even though the characters are okay, they are not Sonic. They've tried to make different levels for these characters that are more sort of fighting, and it's just slow and it's really, really sluggish, and it just falls into this really, really bad trap of normal 3D adventure games, but there's nothing special about those levels. So then you're stuck with having to deal with just the whole Sonic bit, and you've kind of got to sort of get the best out of what is given to you, and that isn't saying much, unfortunately. So even though Sonic isn't solely the reason that Sega are in this position, it definitely hasn't helped. And they keep on dragging the franchise on and on and on and on, as if they eventually want one of the games just to miraculously sell well and hit that spot where it brings the franchise back. And it just hasn't happened. Put it this way, if Sonic was doing well, he wouldn't be appearing in Nintendo games to this day. And unfortunately, he is. So let me know what you guys think about the news this week with regards to Sega. Let me know what your thoughts are about the Sonic franchise. I'm sure you guys would want to put comments on about how I feel about Sonic the Hedgehog 4. Even though I really, really liked Sonic the Hedgehog 4. I'll not hide that. I love it. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think that there's anything that maybe Sega should try going forward? Do you think that maybe the Sonic franchise should stop completely? That is a scary thought if that happens. I would hate for that day to come, but it may. You never know. Does Nintendo step in? Maybe they do. Maybe Nintendo acquires these franchises. Now that is a scary thought. But guys, thank you very much for joining. To find out more about Team Clocked, you can follow us on Twitter at Team Clocked, and you can follow me personally at Digital MB. Thanks very much.